Hey YouTube, welcome. My name is Ray and I'm a mental health therapist in New Jersey. And in today's video, we're going to be going over the cycle of anxiety and some coping skill practice afterwards to challenge those anxious thoughts. So stay tuned. Let's jump right into it. So with the cycle of anxiety, anxiety can be annoying, pestering, a big inconvenience. And we're just going to kind of break down, how does anxiety exactly function within us and ways to challenge it with the coping skill practice. So right off the bat, if we look at this area right here where we're experiencing the anxiety, an anxiety producing situation leads to uncomfortable symptoms such as worry, fear, a racing heart, sweating, or a feeling of being overwhelmed. So, when it comes to these symptoms, it can really occur in our mind with those racing thoughts, those anxious thoughts. And our body could also give off physical symptoms where some people may sweat when they become anxious. Some people may have increased heart rate. Some people do certain behaviors like pacing back and forth. So, really being able to identify what are your early warning signs that you're becoming anxious, because the quicker that we can identify, the quicker that we can address and start to address those anxiety symptoms appropriately so it doesn't continuously build up. Next, on the right hand side, we have the avoidance. Now, with avoidance, uncomfortable symptoms are controlled by avoiding the anxiety producing situation. Examples of avoidance include skipping class to avoid giving a presentation, using drugs or alcohol to numb feelings, procrastination on challenging tasks. So, you may have noticed with yourself possibly that, like, hey, I find myself procrastinating when it comes to certain tasks. And we may even view the task as something basic, something we've done before. It may not be like scary or anything like that, but we just find ourselves just kind of talking ourselves out of it and just not engaging in the actual task. Those are things that we really want to pay attention to. And the procrastination piece of it goes right into the third one of short-term relief from anxiety. Avoidance of the anxiety producing situation gives an immediate sense of relief. The symptoms of anxiety lessen, but only temporarily, because that situation, that task that we may be avoiding, it's still there. So it doesn't necessarily go away. In the moment, we feel that sense of, oh, okay, great. I can, do it at another time. And it's just it's not on our plate right now per se, right? But it's still there. And bringing in a good CBT motto, internally, our thoughts influences our emotions. And that's important because how we feel influences our behavior slash actions. That's everything we do and don't do. And that influence can also come from the environment. And when we're having certain thoughts of avoidance, just not engaging, whatever that task may be, the immediate relief we may feel, it doesn't necessarily override the lingering thoughts of, wait a second, I still need to do this task. I still need to do this task. That's why when we could be doing something that has nothing related to that task we may be avoiding or that situation, but then it'll find itself kind of coming to the forefront of our mind, right? We could just be watching TV on the internet, again, doing something that has nothing to do with that thing that we may be procrastinating about or with, and it'll just seem to just kind of pop up in our mind because it's still there. And the last one right here of long-term anxiety growth. The fear that initially led to avoidance worsens, and the brain learns that when the anxiety producing situation is avoided, the symptoms go away. As a result, the symptoms of anxiety will be worse the next time and avoidance is more likely. So, just going to move this over here a bit for you guys, and you can see right here the cycle, how it just kind of goes round and around and around and around and around, where we start to become used to certain things, especially how our body responds to certain things. So in a nutshell, when those anxiety producing situations come up, those anxiety provoking situations for us, we become used to that pattern of, if we're engaging in the procrastinating, avoiding, using a substance, our body becomes used to that. We become used to that. And now when we start to feel that anxiety again for a different situation, our body starts to say, hey, wait a second, we can do this thing to alleviate the symptoms and the distress of whatever's going on. And because we want that immediate relief from anxiety, because I don't think anybody wants to feel anxious, we'll do that, but it's kind of like slapping a band-aid on a situation that needs just a bit more attention than a band-aid because it's still going to be there. And again, with this cycle, we may wait till what I like to identify as anxious energy. Let's say it's an exam or an assignment for work. We may wait till the last possible moment in time for us to engage in that task. And we may get it done. Heck, we may have gotten an A or done a really great job at that work assignment. But think about that period of time we were literally anxious going through it, how stressed we were, trying to do the research, do the actual work that's needed for the studying, for the actual project, and it becomes so overwhelming. We might even tell ourselves, never again. I'm not doing this again. And then we may find ourselves doing that again. So that really speaks to repeating the pattern. And we want to be able to address these things when we're not in that state. We don't want the anxious state to become our motivator, our drive to get certain things done, especially when more and more things are going to pop up as we just simply go through life. Now let's jump into some coping skill practice, how to challenge those anxious thoughts. Because again, internally, our thoughts influence our emotions, how we feel, influences our behavior / actions. Again, the environment does as well. And how we perceive, which is our thinking, what's going on. We want to be able to reframe that into a healthy, productive manner. And we're going to go through this worksheet right here to challenge and break down these negative, unhelpful thoughts. So what could happen versus what will happen. You are worried about something. It's easy to imagine the worst thing that could possibly happen. In reality, these worries may never come true. What could happen isn't the same as what will happen. And again, in our mind, what we focus on, that genuinely can become our reality because we're focused on the distressing side of a reality that could happen. Those thoughts are influencing our emotions. And remember, whatever type of influence it's having depends on the details of our thoughts, and our behavior / actions are going to respond to that reality versus something that could be more productive, more beneficial for the actual situation. And that's why at times, again, where we may engage and do something, and after completing it, we say, wait, why was it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that scary. It wasn't that overwhelming that we kind of built up in our mind. So here's an example, a scenario that we're going to utilize to kind of break down the worksheet a bit. What is something you are worried about? In the example we put, I'm worried about not being successful in life. Very generic, very broad, very general, right? The therapy tip. Whenever our worry / concern is too vague or open-ended, try defining it more so you have a clear definition for yourself. In this case, ask yourself, what is success to me? While different aspects may come up, it can help by focusing on one aspect at a time so that we don't overwhelm ourselves. So there are times where we can have a very specific thing that we're anxious about that's, invoking this anxiety within us. But there are also times where it could just be these broad things that are floating around in our mind of, man, I'm worried about, am I going to be successful? Right. And that's a broad scope of things, right? We're talking about our personal life as far as intimate partners. We're talking about social life. We're talking about finances, our career, right? There's so many different aspects. So we want to be able to really break it down for ourselves. And when we can see it by, actually doing it on a worksheet, it tends to help with that process. So if we're having very, generalized thoughts of, I'm worried about, am I going to be successful or not? Is successful in life? We just want to be able to break it down a bit and kind of zone into just certain areas so it doesn't overwhelm us. Thinking about what will happen instead of what could happen can help you worry less. Whenever you start to worry, answer these questions. What are some of the clues that your worry will not come true? So now we're challenging the anxious thoughts. And for, again, utilizing the scenario of worried about not being successful in our life, clue number one is, I'm thinking about it so I have the power of awareness to do something productive. Because remember, it's one thing if it's just not on our mind, we're not thinking about it, because then how can we address something or even attempt to address something if we're not thinking about it? but the fact that we are thinking about it is giving us our power to say, okay, we're aware of it. So now we can act on it in some way. We just have to identify what that is. And clue number two, I have been successful in my life before. List times you were successful in life. So again, when we're caught up in these anxious thoughts, life type of thing, we tend to overshadow, our previous accomplishments and things that could be productive for the situation and focus on the distressing side of whatever we're focusing on. And we lose sight of like, wait a second. We have some accomplishments here. We've done similar things before, even if the details are different. We've have made accomplishments before, whether it's within work, school, relationships, whatever it may have been, right? So we want to be able to identify that for ourselves to kind of build up our self-esteem a bit and remind ourselves that, hey, this is possible. We can do this. Clue number three, I have the ability to ask someone, support system, or search online for the answers I'm not sure about on the internet via Google or YouTube to attain the knowledge. So I call YouTube the visual Google, because whenever we don't know something, we may type it on Google, how to bake a cake. On YouTube, how to bake a cake, and we get a video with it, so that we can actually see the process, see the person, what they do with their hands, the order that they do, the steps to make a cake, etc. So with this, we can utilize that to our advantage as well. And we're watching this video of how to kind of go through the worksheet in ways that we can kind of challenge these anxious thoughts. If your worry does not come true, what will probably happen instead? So the thing we're thinking about, again, scrolling back up to the top of, I'm worried about not being successful in life. Very, very understandable and real concern, because, we want to be successful in life. If your worry does not come true, what will probably happen instead? If my worry does not come true, I will be successful. I will have achieved my idea of success and live a happy and fulfilling life. So this is highlighting, okay, so how about if those anxious thoughts that we're, battling in our mind, how about if it doesn't happen? What would be the outcome? And the outcome would be, again, we would feel fulfilled. We would, be successful. We would be happy living a fulfilling life, and things would be good. They'll be great, actually. But we still want to manage those anxious thoughts. But this is highlighting, what is possible, what our outcome, our reality can look like. If your worry does come true, how will you handle it? Will you eventually be okay? If I do not become successful, I don't know how I will handle it. It will be tough for me. I don't know if I will be okay. So I framed it like this because, it's not like we necessarily know all the answers, have all the answers in the moment. So I want to make it a bit more challenging, a bit more realistic when someone's going through this. And when we don't have an answer to soothe our anxious thoughts feed off our uncertainty. We can reflect back to our second box. So again, when we're filling this out, the purpose is get us to actually see what's going on inside of our mind. It's like we know, but being able to really list it, so we can identify what's really going on. And when we go back up to the second box of what are some clues that your worry will not come true? So these are actionable steps that we can take so that we can challenge those anxious thoughts so that they don't feed and continue to grow and grow and grow. Because remember, those thoughts are having an influence on our mood, on how we feel, and our overall functioning. So we definitely want to keep that in mind. So now let's look at the final box. After answering these questions, how has your worry changed? Shift number one, specifying my worry by defining it will make it easier to address, which is box number one. Because again, when we have those broad perceptions, those broad thoughts about certain things, we really want to kind of zone in to make it more manageable, easier to address for ourselves. Because again, being successful at life, that's a very huge area to tackle. So we just want to make it a bit more manageable on our end. Shift number two, I still feel anxious, but I have a sense of what I can do to address my anxious thoughts, referring to box number two with the clues. And shift number three, If my anxious thoughts persist, I can reread this worksheet and identify barriers to address my anxious thoughts. So, additional forms of coping, utilizing your support system, etc. Because when we have it written out for us, we can actually see, what's going on, where's our anxious thoughts actually coming from, and positive and productive things that we can do to address it, so that those anxious thoughts tend to lose their effectiveness. They're not necessarily impacting us anymore because they're addressed. Okay, guys, that was it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it on, tackling, managing, and addressing those anxious thoughts. I'll put a link down in the description of the worksheet so you guys have access to them. Fill it out. I always say practice your coping skills for at least 10 minutes a day, not an hour, not two. I mean, you can if you really want to, but at least 10 minutes a day. So that way we build up those mental reps so that we become more effective at challenging those negative, unhelpful thoughts, those anxious thoughts, so that, we can live a more desirable life. And also in the description, I have a link to my Instagram if you want to follow my Instagram page. And breathe. You got this. Sometimes those thoughts can just feel overwhelming. It can just feel like a lot of emotion going on. Take a step back. Breathe. Let that emotional adrenaline kind of subside a bit. And then let's reapproach the situation. You got this.